So does previous injury increase your risk of re-injury or a different injury? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So what the study was a systematic review meta-analysis, and they were looking therefore at lots of studies and trying to work out overall what the risk was in terms of these particular things. So the first one was, does having a previous calf injury predispose your risk to getting a hamstring injury? And we know that the calf and the hamstring do work together. Obviously they both, especially the gastrocnemius of course in the calf, they flex the knee, they bend the knee. So you could make very good assumptions that if you have a calf injury, then you're going to have more demand placed upon the hamstring because of that deficiency in the calf. And that's what they looked at obviously as what the risk was. And they found that having a previous calf strain did increase the risk of hamstring injury afterwards by 50%. So this is therefore compounding that reality of that, it's not just about re-injury of your injury itself, so the calf, it's other areas your body compensates, and that can put extra strain on them abruptly, and that can then cause a problem. So what about the same injury? So they looked at a hamstring strain and the re-injury risk of a hamstring strain afterwards. And having a hamstring strain, if it was a recent hamstring strain, increased the risk of re-injury by 380%. And if it was more of an older hamstring strain, then it increased the risk by 170%. Which makes sense, because obviously the longer you've gone, the more recovered you are, the more strength you'll have got back, the more flexibility you've got back and everything else. But in the shorter term, you're probably more likely to tear and therefore have problems. So what about other structures? So what about ligament? So it looked also at ACL, the anterior cruciate ligament. So if someone had torn the anterior cruciate ligament, what was their risk of hamstring injury? And this is another one which is very closely aligned. We know that the ACL controls forward translation of that tibia, and in the same plane of motion, in the same angulation is the hamstring. So the hamstring actually does a lot of work to control that same element as well. And that's why you can see in some of the testing that we do as physios, like the Lachman's and the anterior draw test, sometimes the hamstrings actually can give you a bit of a false read on these tests because it's actually bracing the tibia, which means you don't get a lot of movement because the hamstring can control against that. And if they're in a lot of pain, it usually will be. So we know that the hamstring and the ACL are really, really, really intertwined. So this one is going to be fairly obvious that there's going to be an increased risk. But what did they find? And they basically found that if you had injured your ACL, the risk of injuring your hamstring was 70%. So overall, there's no surprise, although some of these stats are quite large, especially on the like-for-like injury, but obviously the translation across to other injuries is truly there as well. Now, you could look at other parts of the body as well, but these looked at these particular areas, and these areas are very interlinked. So obviously you could certainly say that there might be differences in other muscles, but the body does work together. You could make some assumptions that even if you tore, an upper body muscle, it might impact lower body risk because your body works together as a unit. But this shows you that you've got to make sure that you are aware of these factors when it comes to training and getting back to normal, and obviously making sure that other muscles aren't compensating and making sure that you're getting that compensation ironed out. So anyway, that's it for this video, and I'll see you next time.